I want us to look at the background of the Lord's Prayer. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 1, seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. The ministry of Christ brought much attention to him. We have crowds fleeing after Christ. This is a multitude of people following Jesus. Jesus goes up this mountain, sits down, and this is a normal position for a rabbi to teach from. His disciples come to him to hear him preach. Jesus is going to preach truths that would change people throughout centuries. These kingdom truths have impacted many hearts and souls and has a present effect today. One of the things that Jesus does here is that Jesus exposes the Pharisees. He uncovers the hypocrisy within the religious leaders, the unmasking of false outward religiosity. Christ in this section tracks down the great sins within these Pharisees. It's a hypocrisy in connection to prayer. Let's see what Jesus says. Matthew 6:5. And when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. Jesus doesn't condemn prayer at all. Instead, he condemns the heart and attitude behind prayer. Jesus says, don't be like the hypocrites, for they do it for the sake of attention. It says that they love to stand and pray in public places. They love to be noticed, and that is the core issue. They didn't have a loving relationship with God. They loved man's observation. Jesus says to these hypocrites, they have received their reward. What is their reward? The applause of man. We focus on what not to do, but how should we pray? In Matthew 6:6, it says, but when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Jesus says you must do the opposite from what the Pharisees do. Go where no one can see you. Go to a private place. Close the door so that no eye can see you. The secret place protects one from many snares. No one knows about the secret place but you and God. It's an intimate place. It's a place where you go to talk to God. It's private because you want to share the deepest things. You don't care about others seeing you. Instead, you hide from others seeing you. When you go into that secret place, God will show up because you're not seeking man, but God. You're not looking for the approval of man, but intimacy with your Father. Jesus assures you that the Father who sees in secret will reward you. There's a grace lavishly given to you in that secret place. A quote by Thomas Brooks, they that sow in tears secretly shall reap in joy openly. Private prayer shall be rewarded before men and angels publicly. The Father's reward isn't the praise of man that is vain, but experiencing His favor that is eternal. In Hebrews 11:6 it reads, and without faith it is impossible to please Him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who seek Him. A Dutch Reformed missionary, Andrew Murray, says, to the one who withdraws himself from all that is of the world and man and prepares to wait upon God alone, the Father will reveal Himself. In Matthew 6:7, and when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they'll be heard for their many words. Here are two different translations that would be helpful for our study. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans. Another one says, when you pray, do not use a lot of meaningless words. Jesus doesn't discourage long prayers, instead meaningless, repetitious prayers. One can pray for hours and not be heard because of the meaningless words. Prayers are not to be repeated thoughtlessly. True prayer is measured by weight, not by length. A single groan before God may have more fullness of prayer in it than a fine oration of great length, says Charles Spurgeon. In Matthew 6:8 says, do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. Jesus urges the disciples not to pray like the pagans. The pagans pray with many empty voices because their God isn't alive. We can pray to the Father because your Father knows your needs, and before you even ask Him. Your prayers should have substance and meaning. Your words ought to be weighty and of purpose. The reason is because He knows everything about you and I. There's no need that He is not aware of. So then how should we pray? In Matthew 6:9, it says, pray then like this, as Jesus expects us to pray. Jesus, who is known for a prayerful life, expects His own disciples to walk in that way. There's nothing that Jesus calls His own disciples to that which He hasn't done Himself. Jesus, who had a private prayer life, and the disciples had witnessed it. This is the art of prayer Jesus had mastered. He knew what it was to really pray, what a sight it would have been to behold Christ praying. Jesus says here, pray. He doesn't say if you pray, nor does He say you should consider to pray. This is expected of you and I to follow Christ in. Since Christ prayed, what makes us think that we don't have to? Prayer is essential. Christ informs us the importance of prayer. Prayer is essential to our living as Christians. Prayer is the breath in the lungs. One cannot live without it. A prayerless Christian is a suffocating Christian. In 1 Thessalonians 5:17, it reads, pray without ceasing. Another translation reads, and never stop praying. Martin Luther has a quote. He says, I have so much to do that I shall spend the first 3 hours in prayer. Prayer is something that we learn by practice. You can study about it and learn much about it, but unless you pray, you cannot grow in prayer. We're in the school of prayer, and we have Christ who is pleased to teach us. The more that you and I pray, the more that we become better at praying. This prayer is a framework to structure our prayers around. It's a template for our prayers. It's a guide for us that we would have our prayers accepted by God. A pattern for the prayers we send to heaven. This prayer is the ground that we build upon that is firm and sturdy. Jesus teaches His disciples to have a secret prayer life. May we look to Christ. May we ask Him to teach us. May God bless our journey as we walk through the Lord's Prayer in our study. God bless you.